fear of snakes is one of our most common phobias. But why do we have such an adverse reaction to snakes, even though most of us have never seen one in the wild? Snakes are found on every continent except Antarctica, and there are over 3,600 species slithering across them. Most are non-venomous, but the ones that are venomous can kill, which gives all snakes this bad reputation. However, John Can and his snake-loving family find them irresistible.
People are scared of snakes because of the unknown factor. And even when you fully explain it to them, there's no danger if you're careful. They're still got that phobia there, they're concerned. The main thing is you don't try to pick him up, you don't tread near him. A lot of deadly snakes, you can tread near them, they'll escape. A lot of them will put up and have a go at you. They're not aggressive, they're defensive. And their defense is being aggressive.
Given the deadly reputation of venomous snakes, why is it that snakes are the most common exotic animals kept in captivity? John's unique family story goes some way to answering this. John Can has been living with snakes all his life. The Can family has worked with snakes for almost 100 years, and John's father, George, took over the snake show at La Perouse from 1920, which is still operating today at the same site in Sydney, Australia. The original show was promoted as the Snake Pit of Death, guaranteed to draw a crowd. John and his brother George Jr. have been extremely close to snakes their whole life. So much so that John is a leading expert and author on the subject of snakes and other exotics. Since his retirement from the snake shows in 2010, John has had more time to concentrate on writing books about these cold-blooded reptiles that have fascinated him since childhood.
Dad started when he came back from the First World War. He was still in the army in February 19. Come back from France. There was nobody doing the snake show, and he was the snake man by then. So he went and caught a few snakes and set up the pit at the La Perouse. And Mum used to be the Cleopatra. She was the first snake show lady in Tasmania when she was 13. Mum worked on the same showground as Dad, and down the track they got married. Whenever Dad was bush, Mum used to do the show at La Perouse. Never with real bad snakes, I can assure you. She probably had pythons and a few black snakes.
It's uncommon for exotic pet ownership to cross over many generations. But for John Can, the handling of dangerous snakes is a family tradition. The collection of snakes includes some of Australia's deadliest species.
We got most of our snakes from around here, but we used to travel the country a lot when we was getting snakes for milking. We used to go to different lake countries in New South Wales, down into Victoria. But generally speaking, we used to get local snakes.
When they weren't using local snakes in the show, John and his dad regularly traveled into the countryside looking for new exhibits to include.
When I was a kid, I was in a swamp at Nowra one time. I was probably about, 8, 9 year old. And Dad used to always hunt with his trousers that roll up around his legs, and he was in the water where this big black snake was. He was over 2 metres, thicker than your arm, and Dad was battling to get that snake in the bag, but he said, pull my trousers down. And before he knew it, I unbuckled his belt and pulled his trousers down. His trousers were floating in the bloody water, and he didn't see the funny side of it. Later on, he always said, roll me trousers down.
The diamond python has a stunning skin coloration, which makes it an attractive option as a pet. They can often be found in the roof spaces of houses, an unwelcome surprise for unsuspecting homeowners. The keeping of dangerous snakes is a risk, and yet their popularity as pets is growing worldwide. In the wild, snakes avoid humans, whereas in captivity, they spend a lot of time being handled. But are all snakes the same? Is it possible to completely tame a snake?
They all have their own temperament, whatever mood they're in, but some of our deadliest snakes do quieten down in captivity after a time, and people, in my opinion, carelessly put the venomous snakes around their neck, and as I photographed in one of my books, a friend of mine kissing a tiger snake, and that's the snake that killed him. So you can never be certain they're not going to bite even when they're quiet. I have had friends of mine in comas for weeks and weeks after a bitten by a snake they reckon would never ever bite them. So.
Rob, who is one of the current snake handlers at La Perouse, also works as a professional snake catcher and knows what's required to safely manage these reptiles.
The experience of being bitten by a snake can sometimes be a good lesson. Best avoided, but I have been bitten by venomous snakes. Out of thousands of snake species, that are many of them are harmless, I could have been bitten by many harmless species. But I think what people are trying to ask is, have you been bitten by venomous snakes? And the answer is yes. It'd be sort of weird if you hadn't, in a way, to be so involved with snakes and never actually experience that part of. And I don't recommend it in any way. Don't go and get yourself bitten by a snake. Our only highly venomous ambush predator is this historical snake. But it's got the worst name of any snake in history. This snake is called the death adder. One of the fastest striking snakes in the world. And they are quite venomous if you measure the toxicity of their venom. And the best way I can describe how venomous a death adder is by how many people used to die from its bite. The death rate from death adder bite before the invention of antivenom was apparently 50% fatality rate before the invention of antivenom.
Even when you're an expert with snakes, it must be remembered you could be dealing with a venomous snake that won't hesitate to bite if they feel threatened. John's dad survived the ordeal of being bitten by a tiger snake.
He got a very bad bite from a big tiger snake on the ankle there, and the snake really hung on and gave him a lot of venom, and all he did was say to his friend who was with him at the time, "Don't tell the missus about it," you know. But she knew, she could see the look on his face that he was bitten. But that bite would have killed a normal person, I would say. Could have been within 10 minutes, it could be an hour or two. But it was a bad bite from a big cranky snake.
Tiger snakes, one of the world's deadliest snakes, are highly venomous and found in subtropical and temperate regions of Australia. Tiger snakes are dangerous, but people do keep them as pets. They appear intimidating, fearsome, but it is mostly a bluff. Experts will say that you do need a high level of experience in snake handling before you even think about keeping a venomous species. Is a snake recommended as an ideal pet? As with most exotic animals, it requires a special kind of person that's prepared to provide the right environment for them to live in. But unlike a domestic cat or dog, a snake will never come looking for any affection from its human.
If you like snakes, that's the only way you can call them a pet, because they'll never get to know you. A lot of people get the impression that snakes do know you. I don't believe it. They'll come to you when you open their cage or their door or whatever. They think you're going to supply them with food. Some snakes will bite you when they're really hungry by mistake, but soon let you go. We're talking about non-venomous snakes. But generally speaking, they make a good pet, you know, as long as you can look after them properly and you've got the right facilities to do so.
Yeah, I would definitely say snakes make good pets. Depends on who you are, but they're more catered to somebody who has an interest in natural history. See, a dog or a cat is for people who just need something and it has to do something for them. With a reptile, especially a snake, it's more of an interesting creature from a scientific point of view. They're interesting in their reproductive biology, in their behaviour. They're low maintenance, so they actually make quite good pets.
John Can is a responsible owner with an enormous amount of experience. He has always been around snakes and other exotics, and in some way, this has definitely enhanced his lifestyle. Snakes evoke fear, but for John, they are a constant joy and a pet that in most cases are easily handled. Knowing how to handle a snake properly is important. Allowing them to move freely is recommended, as it will soon let you know if it isn't comfortable.
You never restrict their movement. If I stopped him from moving, he would get cranky about it, maybe not bite me. If I held it long enough, he probably might. I don't know, I'm not going to try it out. But irrespective of that, you never restrict a snake from moving unless it's a venomous snake and you got him by the tail and you're trying to keep his head away from you. You hold them by the body. But as a so-called pet or that python, you don't restrict their movements.
John's diamond python is from the python family, which are non-venomous and known as constrictors. Tightening slowly around their victim, constrictors coil their body around the prey until they are suffocated and ready to consume. Pythons can swallow prey bigger than the diameter of their own heads, which broadens the possibilities of a hearty meal. The snake pit at La Perouse provides the opportunity for the public to get up close and personal with some of Australia's deadliest snakes in a controlled environment. Rob recalls the impact his snakes have on the public that come to see the shows.
People react here to snakes a lot better than they do when it's in their house. A snake in a snake show is always, people react to it much better because it's in a controlled situation and there's a snake handler there. If you bring the snake over to the wall to show them, they step backwards at the same rate. And some people even scream when the snake heads in their direction. So the people are as highly variable as the snakes are.
Well, they're all very curious. I often used to get the impression at times that people are a bit disappointed you never got bitten, which is probably could have been true. I'd like to think I was wrong, but they're interested on the educational aspect of it.
The shows at La Perouse have been entertaining people for generations. These days, the shows educate people about some of Australia's deadliest snakes that are kept safely tucked away in bags at the snake pit, waiting for their turn to draw gas from the spectators. As each snake is displayed, Rob explains the characteristics of the species and exposes some common misconceptions about snakes. Safety is always top of mind when working with these reptiles, and even though he knows their behaviors well, there is always the slim chance he could get bitten. They have to be respected at all times. But as far as John is concerned, a lifetime's fascination with snakes proves that even this misunderstood and often feared predator can become a unique part of the family. Just don't expect them to fetch a ball.